Hey there, colonists. Did you know you could buy entire rolls of biohazard stickers? Not that that means anything. So we've been working hard on getting ready for the next game, and that involves us, of course, rushing like panic madmen, getting the new app ready and rolling out some new features. One of the cool things is this is probably one of our biggest feature rollouts to date because we're going to be introducing two new features. We're going to have character stats and we're going to have actions. And even more important than that, we're going to have the actions of one player being able to affect another player's stats so that we'll be able to roll out more skills, being able to do more things to other players and allow for more interaction. So you're going to see skills that have been kind of on the back burner for a while now have more prominence.
So let's just hop into it. This is my development environment, but in the center here you see the new app, and the biggest thing you're going to notice right away is where the logo used to be. You now see these biometrics. The biometrics are the core stats of Planetfall. Everything kind of focuses around keeping them up and keeping them going, and pretty much everything you do is affected by them. Now, the six biometrics are health, representing your general, intactness of person; hunger, how well fed you are; energy, basic calorie intake and like mental and physical energy; morale, which is your ability to, how good you're feeling; focus, your ability to concentrate; and hydration, which is how much water you're taking in. The two biggest effects that these biometrics have are these things down here: the time modifier and the productivity modifier. These are calculated based on the stats above. The time modifier is mainly affected by the physical traits, but also weigh in some of the mental ones. The productivity modifier weighs in mostly the mental style traits, but also some of the physical ones. So in this case, because we're decided that 80 is the preferred kind of level going on, where anything above 80 gets you a benefit. So if I was like 90% across the board, I would get a small bonus to the amount of time and what I produce. But in this particular case, I'm a little bit lower. So you'll notice if I go down to my time modifier, this means that all my timers for activities are going to be multiplied by 1.05. And my productivity modifier means that since I'm below 1, the maximum I produce on any action is going to be lowered by that amount. So this kind of forms the impetus to keep everything up. And since multiple things are calculated in, you can't let one falter. So there are various things can affect your biometrics. For instance, now if you go into a medical emergency, you'll see there's a start bleed out, and I hit start bleed out, and now there's a cancel button. It's important now to hit the cancel button because the cancel button will make it, that's for like, you fat fingered the button and you weren't really meaning to start your bleed out. But if you hit treat and you go back to your stats, you notice my health was 70, now it's down to 65. And that means the rest of my stuff got affected. And there's going to be actions which can allow you to increase your health or hunger or anything like that, and also that are going to allow other people to affect your health and hunger, and all your other stats. So all that gets around to actions, and we'll get to that one moment. So if you go into your colony record now, you'll notice that if you go to the right skills, I'm going to go down to my survival skill real quick. Everyone remembers hunting from last game, I hope. Is you go to your survival skill, and instead of we were kind of wedging the production dynamic into our scannables feature, and now we've moved it out to its own kind of actions feature, which does its own stuff. So you go into survival, and whatever actions are eligible that are associated with survival, we go and they displayed. And I have this one that I've already made called Hunt. And I go in, and this is my action screen, and it shows me the amount of time that's going to take me, and it's going to say what it consumes, what it has a chance of producing, biometric changes I'm going through. So in this particular one, I'm spending bullets. I produce animal carcasses, and I go through some biometric changes. I can lose 1 to 5 energy and 1 to 5 focus. Now, one thing that's not shown here is, and I'll show you behind the curtain a little bit, is that all this is being, calculated and can get bonuses from various things. For instance, you'll notice that I had that 1 point, that time modifier. Well, this is actually a 10-minute base action, but I get this extra 43 seconds because I have that slight penalty. Now, if I had a bigger penalty, it would actually go much larger. I could end up spending 15, 20 minutes just because my character's not in good shape. It takes me longer to do it. So I go in and I start the action. It tells me what I should be role-playing. I can pause it now, and then I can restart it. And I'll just do some back-end magic in order to skip ahead. So I get to the final moments, and it turns out, and then I get a result. So I used 2 caseless rounds, and I got 4 animal carcasses. I rolled well in that particular instance. And I lost 3 energy and lost 2 focus. And it tells me the result. I managed to kill some animals. Yay, PETA's pissed. So you'll notice this reflected in the biometrics up here. And if I go into my resources, I can find my animal carcasses. And they too have actions. We're still putting those in. But I lost some caseless rounds. And that's what I'm able to do. Now, the other thing that are really cool for actions is my character happens to have psychology. So I'll go into psychology. And you can have actions that affect other players. So I go in and I say, okay, this is my counseling action. You provide counseling and emotional support to another character. This can cost me 0 to 3 focus on my end, but gives somebody else 5 to 10 morale. So I start the action. Now you notice this 10-minute went from 10:43 to 10:49. That's because I dropped a little bit in my stats. So I go in and I do a little bit of magic in order to make things go. And I lost no focus, so I did well there. And my target gets a morale. So how do I communicate that? You hit back, and it gives you a QR code very similar to the one on the wound screen. And you let them scan it, and if you scan it, I'll hit done, and they'll scan it and they'll get the bonuses to their stats. So we now have actions, which are kind of a big deal. And now I'm going to go back behind the scenes, and show you what all that affects, and really kind of how programming works. And how coming up with a solution to these problems, which if I wanted to write rules for this, I could write a rule for how this affects, and people could keep track of it. And in a traditional LARP way, we would just say, okay, this produces 1 to 5, and we would roll, or this would just give you 5 points. When we do it with a computer, it becomes seamless, but that means we have to do it algorithmically. And when we do things algorithmically, they become more complicated. And I'm going to show you how we have to design things on the back end. So here's our admin, our kind of background where we as the storytellers, GMs, whatever you want to call us, do all our business. I'm gonna show you how actions work. Now the biggest problem with, or the biggest challenge in doing things with a computer as opposed to doing things on paper, is that if I want to make an exception in a paper rule, I can just write that this is an exception to the rule. In software, you can't do that. Whatever kind of behavior you want, you have to regiment, and you have to make sure the computer knows how to handle it every single time. So in order to codify all the possible things we would want to do with actions, we had to go through jump through some hoops. This took weeks of work in order to come up with something which does everything we want, and it's not even quite complete yet. There's still some stuff we want to do. So I'm going to show you, once again, our pretty skill chart. But I'm going to go over into our survival skill. We have so many skills. So I go to survival 1, and I have this thing called actions. I can create all sorts of actions, like if I want to say trap, I can create an action called trap. But I'm going to go look and hunt. And when I go into hunt, you'll notice that this is a pretty complicated page. It has a lot of bells and whistles on it. And I'll just walk you through all the different things that we can go through. So we have requirements. Requirements are things which aren't used in the action, but you have to have. In this particular case, we just added skills, survival 1. However, I could say that you're required to have a certain type of gun or group of items that count as firearms and add that in. And I could also say that this requires a world object. A world object is what we've been encountering, like iron deposits or smelters or things like that. But in this case, it doesn't require a world object or an item. But I had to design this feature together so that it would check. The computer would know to check for all these different types of things. And I can add very easily anything I want. So if I wanted a firearm class D to then now be required, I can add it and I can delete it just as easily. Inputs are, what gets consumed, what you get taken. In this particular case, it's a caseless firearm round to do the hunting. Now, you'll notice that I took 5, but it says resources caseless round 7 here. The reason is that I'm able to go in and add modifiers. Now, the modifiers, I can say this caseless round, it takes 5 rounds or 7 rounds, but if someone has firearms 1, they get to use 1 less round. If they have firearms 2, they get to use 1 less round. So this, as we're able to add organic benefits to having skills all over the place, where just certain people who specialize become better at stuff. Eventually, the interface on the app is going to be more transparent about what's actually going on. I'm going to try to make it more like, say, the screens in like Diablo or other computer RPGs where it spells out the math going on so you know why you're doing better or where you could do better. So if I wanted to say, oh, caseless round, I'll use that. I can then say, okay, if I want firearms 3, and that lowers it by an additional 1. Ta-da. And then it gets into the outputs. Once again, we have to make it so that all the little exceptions, all the little tweaks have to be able to account for. So we say that this produces the small animal carcass object. And we have, but if you have hunting, see, inputs is really weird if you pull in a range of things. Out, because we can't really check whether or not you have enough of them. Outputs, however, we can make a range of things much more easily. So we can say the outputs have a small animal carcass of 1 to 4, but I can actually add as many different outputs as I want, including world objects and items and resources. So this will be able to craft more and more items as things goes on. So, and then I can say, well, if I have hunting 1, in addition to having survival, I must have survival. But if I have hunting 1, the minimum I produce is increased by 1. If I have hunting 2, the maximum I make is increased by 1. And so on and so forth until there's just more and more bonuses for having higher and higher hunting. So the people with better skills have a tangible benefit in this particular action. Once again, we're eventually going to have the app explain this to you, that you're actually getting more. So you feel like, you understand that actually my character is better at this sort of thing. And then you go into these messages, there's the title of the action, the time it takes in minutes, the descriptions, the in progress when you completed it. And then, I have these user and target effects. The user effect is when I decrease or increase one of your biometrics. And if I do a target effect, that indicates is that this action has a target, like the counseling action. Like if I went to I'll go over here and I'll go into psychology. So I go into psychology 1 and, oh, that's psychiatry. Ask an adult what the difference is. So we go into psychology and you see this counseling 1 action. This has very few requirements. It just says you need psychology 1. And it has a user effect of decreasing your stats. And then it says a target effect of morale 5 to 10. So we built this entire screen, and it can do almost everything we want. Eventually, we want, similar to the modifiers that you see over here in the inputs and outputs, we want to add modifiers to the user and target effects as well, so that someone with more counseling gets better results. Or more psychology, we get more results on counseling and all that sort of stuff. So, but once again, we're building towards this thing that the characters are interrelated with each other and everybody can help other people out. We can also make it so that simply consuming or drinking coffee can also give you focus, or eating stuff solves your hunger and gives you more energy at the same time, and so on and so forth. So there's an economy of the things you're doing.
So yeah, the new app is up on the website as of right now, and I have it running on my device. We're going to be sure to sync right before the game because we're adding new actions, so syncing will pull all those down and stuff like that. One of these issues with bringing in a feature in hot like this is that we don't have much time for testing and we don't have much time for development. But the fact of the matter is that 2 months to roll out new features in what is basically a MMO when I'm working on the weekends, that just takes time. But hopefully it'll work out just fine. There's been some bugs that we fixed this round. The thing with the resources dropping should be fixed. And I also want to call out, a lot of people have been handing out invite codes. I really appreciate that. A lot of people are inviting new people. And the game has only been growing and only been getting better. And it's just amazing to see how much everyone has been contributing and how much everyone has been helping us out. And I know Riley feels the same way. So, and the only other issues going in is that I know it's going to be a rainy weekend. I'm keeping an eye on the weather. If the weather moves from being wet to being dangerous, I've already discussed it with the site, and Jimmy is more than willing to let us take a day later in July that we can move things to, and we can just move all the tickets over to that date. And that's the only issue going in. So yeah, keep bringing in new people, keep sharing, keep, stuff on social media is very effective on getting people into it. And you know what? Prepare for Planetfall, you plucky colonists.